We start with the chapter atoms, molecules and nuclei. We discuss the experiment performed by Geiger and Madsen. So this experiment, it was a narrow beam. There was a narrow beam of alpha particle, which was through out to some radioactive source, and and it was made to made to strike on a golden foil, and then the scattered alpha particles were detected. Some of the alpha particles through the detector here used, which was made up of zinc sulfide screen, and the microscope. The alpha particles just produced the scintillations on the screen, and which could be observed through the microscope. The whole setup was enclosed in an evacuated chamber. Okay, so basically we saw what the experiment showed us was the deviation of this alpha particles when it passes through the golden foil. So basically this alpha particles being positively charged and this gold foil, so there was a sort of a deviation which happened. So the observation was that most of the alpha particles, they passed undeviated through this screen, and most of them they were slightly deflected, and some of them they were deflected more than 90, and some of them they went back straight away 180 degrees. So that sort of deflection was observed. So through this deflection and all sort of things, we came to the conclusion the Rutherford's model of atom came up. Rutherford's it came up. Rutherford came up with the idea of the model of an atom. He stated that the atom has a tiny positive charge core, which is called as the nucleus. Okay, the total positive charge and the entire mass is confined inside the nucleus. The nucleus has a positive charge. The nucleus is surrounded by negatively charged electrons as orbiting which are orbiting around the nucleus. Also, the atom is electrically neutral because it has got the number of positive charges on the nucleus is equal to the total negative charges. So an atom consists of equal number of protons and the electrons. So the size of the nucleus is 10 to minus 15. It is about 1 lakh times smaller than the size of an atom. So that is, the nucleus is very much smaller, 1 lakh times smaller than the size of an atom. This was the statements made by Rutherford. So, but the theory what it could not explain was the stability of the atomic structure. That is, the atom cannot, or no stable atom could exist. Should exist. That is because an atom, because an electron, if it is revolving around the nucleus continuously, then every accelerated electron should give out charge. So should give out energy. So basically, something that is already accelerating around the nucleus should always give out should always radiate some sort of energy, and hence its energy should go on decreasing, and finally it should fall into the nucleus. That was the basic theory. So that means that there should be no stable atom. Every electron which revolves around the nucleus should fall into the nucleus after some period of time, after giving out solid energy. Also, the frequency of wave emitted by the electron is equal to the frequency of revolution. That means that if it is revolving, if there is a continuous acceleration of the electron around the nucleus, that means there should be a continuous energy coming out from the nucleus. That means there should be a continuous we should see a continuous bright energy, bright light coming out from that source. So that was the second thing which could not be explained from this model. Niels Bohr came up with a satisfactory explanation for the Rutherford's atomic model. He gave 3 postulates for that model. The first postulate was regarding the acceleration of the electrons. The necessary centripetal force for the circular motion is provided by the electrostatic force of attraction between the negatively charged nucleus and the positively charged nucleus and a negatively charged electron. That is, the electrons moving around the nucleus, so the necessary centripetal force between them is provided by the electrostatic force of attraction between the protons and the electrons. That is given by F is equals to 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught E square upon R square, where E square will be the magnitudes of the electron of the charges. So we have the centripetal force which is equals to mv square upon r. So here the centripetal force equals to the electrostatic force of attraction. So we have mv square upon r equals to 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught E square upon R square. Second postulate states that the electron revolves only around the nucleus only in those orbits in which angular momentum is equals to the integral multiple of h upon 2 pi. That is, the electrons will revolve only in those orbits, or the revolution of the electrons takes place in only those orbits whose angular momentum is equal to the integral multiple. These orbits are called as stationary orbits, or quantized orbits, or Bohr's orbits. an electron does not radiate energy while revolving in this orbit, and that is the energy remains the constant, hence the stability of the atomic structure remains the constant. There is a stability maintained throughout the atomic structure. So what we have is the angular momentum should be equals to the integral multiple of h upon 2 pi. We have angular momentum equals to I upon omega, equals to I omega, where omega is the velocity, which is v equals to r omega, so omega equals to v upon r. So we have angular momentum, the inertia, which is equals to mr square, that is mass into the distance square. So we have the angular momentum, which is equal angular momentum I omega, which is equal, I is mr square into omega, which is equals to v upon r. So r gets cancelled, we are left with mvr, that is your angular momentum. That should be equal to the integral multiple of h upon 2 pi, where mvr is equals to nh upon 2 pi, where n will be the number of orbit in which the electrons will revolve. Okay, those are called as the stationary orbits. Now the third postulate states that when the electron jumps from the orbit of high energy to the orbit of low energy, it gives out energy in the form of a quantum or a photon. So these excited electrons, they jump from the higher energy state to a lower energy state, and while jumping out, they give out energy which comes to us in the form of photons or quanta, or in the form of packets. So h mu is the photons, and here nth orbit is the higher energy orbit, pth orbit is the lower energy orbit. So the amount of energy given out from higher to lower energy will be equals to En minus Ep, which is equals to a photon. A series of spectral lines is radiated due to transition of electrons from higher state to lower state, from different outer orbits to a fixed inner orbit. The various spectral lines are observed for hydrogen atoms. So these are the different spectral lines, spectral series, which we can say, which are observed when an electron it radiates energy while going from an outer orbit state to a fixed inner orbit state. So we have a Lyman series. This series arises due to the transition of electrons from the different outer orbits to the ground or the first Bohr orbit, that is n equals to 1. So that is the orbit p will be equals to 1. So we have the formula 1 upon lambda equals to r, 1 upon 1 square minus 1 upon n square, where n can be equals to 2, 3, 4, 5, anything other than 1, because the electron has to fall to because the electron will come from the n, from the second orbit, can come from third, fourth or fifth, and can fall onto the first orbit when it can radiate energy. So the energy radiated while falling to the first orbit will be given in the ultraviolet region. So this series lies in the ultraviolet region of the spectrum, where the wavelength is around 1216 angstroms. Next we have the Palmar series. This series originates due to the transition of the electron from different outer or outermost orbit to the second outermost to the second orbit, where p will be equals to 2. So we have 1 upon lambda equals to r, 1 upon 2 square minus 1 upon n square, where n can be anything other than 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the electron can come from third orbit, fourth orbit, fifth orbit, sixth orbit, and it can fall into the second orbit. Here the spectrum, here the ranges lies, here the series lies in the visible region, and the wavelength is 6563 angstroms. Next we have a Paschen series. It is a series of spectral lines originate from the transition of the different outer orbits to the third. Now this was the P1, P2. Here it will fall into the third orbit. So we have number n equals to 4, 5, 6. Again we have p equals to 3 and n square. The wavelength is 18,750 angstroms to 12,820 angstroms. This spectrum lies in the infrared region. We again have a bracket series out here, where the electron will fall from any of the outermost orbit, and it will fall into the fourth orbit, radiating the energy, and that wavelength it will be 40,518 angstroms to 26,250 angstroms. This will come into this series lies in the near infrared region. Then we have the Pfund series, where the electron will fall from any of the outermost orbit, and it will drop down to the fifth orbit. So it can the electron can come from 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th orbit and can fall into the fifth orbit. The wavelength is 75,587 angstroms and 46,533 angstroms. This series lies in the far infrared region. radioactive decay or radioactive disintegration. A radioactive element, it actually constantly breaks up into fresh radioactive atoms, and by giving out energies in the form of alpha, beta and gamma rays. The new atoms in general are radioactive. The spontaneous breaking of this nucleus is into is no this spontaneous breaking of the nucleus is called as the radioactive disintegration. So we have a decay law. The decay law says that the number of nucleus undergoing decay per unit time is proportional to the number of unchanged nuclei present in that state. So the number of nucleus, so we have minus dn upon dt is directly proportional to n, where n is the number of nuclei present at that instant of time, and dn are the number of nuclei that are changed with respect to the time t. Okay, so we have minus dn by dt directly proportional to n. So dn by dt is equals to minus lambda n, where lambda is a decay constant. We have taken a decay constant, we integrate on both the sides, we get dn upon n is equals to minus lambda dt. So dn upon n, we get log to the base e, log n to the base e minus lambda t plus c, where c is again a constant of integration whose value depends on the initial conditions. So again, if we take the initial condition at time t equals to 0, where the disintegration has not yet started, then we have the number of nuclei is nothing but the original nuclei. We have the original nuclei which is not yet disintegrated, we take it to be n0. Now we have the equation log n0 to the base e equals to 0 plus c. At time t equals to 0, this becomes 0 plus c. Now we'll substitute the value of c in the equation in the above equation. So we get log to the base e, log n to the base e minus lambda t plus log n naught to the base e. Now again we take this log on that side, we have log n to the base e minus log n naught to the base e equals to minus lambda t. So log of, we know the log's log, that is n upon n naught is equals to minus lambda t. So n upon m naught is equals to e raised to minus lambda t. We remove the log, we have an exponential over here, that becomes minus lambda t. So again we have n equals to n0 e raised to minus lambda t. So this expression shows us that the number of nuclei of given radioactive substances, it decreases exponentially with time. Okay, so the nuclei which are there in the radioactive substance, it will decrease exponentially with time. After some time it will go on decreasing. So we need to find the decay constant. For that we have the equation. From this equation we have the same equation over here. From the equation I can find the lambda, which is equals to dn upon dt upon this n. But also we have find the number of nuclei. So that is n equals to n0 e raised to minus lambda t, where we take here t is equals to 1 upon lambda. We define t equals to 1 upon lambda over here. So substituting t as 1 upon lambda here, lambda gets cancelled. So we are left with n equals to n0 upon e. So we know the value of e, so 2.718. So we have n equals to 0.37 into n0. So that means the decay constant lambda, which is equals to 1 upon t, that is the lambda which is equals to 1 upon t, can be defined as it is the reciprocal of time duration in which the substance decays to 37% of its original quantity. That is the lambda, that is the lambda which is equals to 1 upon time t. It is nothing but the reciprocal of the time for which the substance decays to 37% of its original quantity. The original quantity up to 37%, the time required for the substance to decay 37% of its original quantity. Now we will find the half-life period for a radioactive substance. So half-life period of a radioactive substance, it is defined as the time required for which in which the half of the substance gets disintegrated. So we have the equation n equals to n0 e raised to minus lambda t. So at time t, which is we take it as capital T, the substance is disintegrated to its half of its original, where n0 is the original, it is disintegrated to half of it. So we have n equals to n0, so n0 upon 2 is equals to n0 e raised to minus lambda t. n0 we can cancel them, so we are left with half e raised to minus lambda t. So e raised to lambda t equals to 2. So lambda t becomes equals to log 2 to the base e, that gives you the value 0.693. So your capital T becomes equals to 0.693 upon lambda. So using this expression we can determine the half-life of a radioactive substance if its decay constant is known. We have the de Broglie hypothesis. In 1924, de Broglie suggested that if radiant energies has both the nature of the wave and a particle, nature and particle nature, that is the wave and a particle nature of a energy, then the particle must have a wave associated with its motion, that is the particle must be moving like a must have the property of a wave with its motion. He believed that this energy and matter must have some symmetrical concepts, so characters. So the de Broglie proposed that the wavelength associated with the particle of mass m moving with velocity v is given by lambda, which is equals to h upon p, where p is the momentum, so h is equals to m into v, where h is your Planck's constant and p is the momentum. He used this Planck's constant and Einstein's mass energy relation to support this to support his hypothesis, and then Planck's energy, and according to Planck's, the energy carried by a photon is given by E, which is equals to h mu. So we have mu is equals to hc upon lambda, so we have E equals to hc upon lambda. Now where c will be the velocity of light, lambda will be the frequency, lambda will be the wavelength, and mu here will be the frequency. So in all according to Einstein's mass energy equation, we have E equals to mc square, so mc square becomes equals to E. We can take E is equals to hc upon lambda, so taking lambda on the other side, we have the value for lambda, which is equals to hc upon mc square, so we have h upon mc, so lambda is equals to h upon p. The wavelength of so where mc is the moment of where mc will be the moment of the photons, so the wavelength of moving microscopic objects are very small and that cannot be measured, and we do not feel their existence. Okay, so basically the de Broglie hypothesis gives you the wavelength of a particle, which is equals to h upon p, where h will be a Planck's constant and p will be the momentum. So according to de Broglie, every moving particle associated with a wave of wavelength is given by lambda, which is equals to h upon p, or which you can write h upon m into v, that will be the momentum. So here we have the properties of alpha, beta and gamma rays. So alpha particles, beta particles and the gamma rays. So alpha particles, they are the positive alpha, these things are three of the things are distinguished accordingly. So the positively charged particles, alpha particles are positive charged particles. These are the helium atoms with both electrons removed, so its mass around 6.64 into 10 to minus 27 kgs. We have the beta particles, these are the fast moving electrons from the nucleus, and these are the gamma rays. Gamma rays are not particles, but they are the electromagnetic rays, basically the photons of very short wavelengths. These photons originate from the nucleus and are called as the gamma rays. Next we have the deflection. Has been positively charged, they are deflected by the electric and magnetic field. Being negatively charged, they are deflected by the electric magnetic field, but the gamma rays are not affected by electric and magnetic field as they are neutral. Next we have the speed. The speed of emission depends upon the speed of emission of alpha particle. It depends upon the nature of the radioactive element. It varies from 1/10 to 1,000th of a speed of light. Then we have the beta particles. This ranges from 1 to 99% at the speed of light. Then we have the gamma rays. They move with the speed of light as they have the photons. So next the ionization power. They can ionize the gas when they pass through the gas. Next they can ionize, but they can ionize the gas, but the power is about 1/100th of a alpha particle. And similar way, they have very low ionization power when it comes to gamma rays, because they have around 1/1000th of a alpha particle. Next, about the penetrating power. This alpha particles, they are very less penetrative. Then the beta particles, they are penetrative more than that of the alpha particle. And in case of gamma rays are very high penetration power. They can even penetrate through a 25 centimeter thick iron plates. They can even penetrate those, so the gamma rays have high penetration power.